Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of We're All Mad Here. I hope you enjoyed the first episode, and we're gonna get going on this week's topic, Marie Balter. Okay, which one do you think is worse? Being the only one of 3 children given up by your mother and spending your most formative years in foster care? Or getting adopted by a strict older couple whose punishments for bad behavior are stuff we see in Guantanamo? Or what about becoming so depressed by your life that you land in a mental asylum and don't leave for over 20 years? Marie Balter had the incredible bad luck to have all of these in her life. She was born in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is near Boston, in 1930, at the very start of the Great Depression. Her birth name was Patricia DeMille, and she was ultimately the second of 3 girls. Her mother, Mary, was an unmarried alcoholic. In 1935, Mary left her middle daughter, Patricia, at an orphanage. She kept her older and younger daughter, and it's unclear why 5-year-old Patricia was the only one left behind. In any case, just a year later, Patricia was adopted. The couple was older than most adoptive couples. They were both in their 50s, and they were an immigrant couple from Italy, and they only spoke Italian. Captain Jack and Akersha Bartello had never had children, and why they decided to adopt a young child in their middle age, I have no idea. They renamed their daughter Marie, and she, being very bright, picked up Italian within a year. It seems that the Bartellos believed that showering their daughter with toys and clothes would make up for the way they treated her emotionally and physically. They were very strict, and when Marie talked back, Akersha would tie her hands and lock her in the basement. Other times they would hang her from the rafters. Marie said there was no leeway to make mistakes. She was expected to be a 6-year-old adult. The one place she found solace was church. Though she only attended once a week, it served as a balm against her terrible home life. She's quoted as saying, "That 1 hour at church helped me survive. I could go before the statue of the Blessed Mother and bring her my sorrows and know that she had heard. I never left church not feeling better." By the time she was 9, Marie was a very devout Catholic who wanted to glorify God at all times. But she couldn't do it at home. While some sources label the Bartellos as Catholics themselves, it may have only applied to Akersha. Jack had despised the church since childhood. He was raised by his godfather, who was a priest, and when 9-year-old Jack was caught using profanity, his godfather made him clean the floor of the church with his tongue. Because of this, at home Marie only sang hymns in English, but she was always afraid that her father would glean the meanings of the songs. For a long time, Marie didn't even know she was adopted. Back in the 30s, adoptive parents were advised to keep adoptions a secret from everyone, but especially their child. Nevertheless, everyone in the neighborhood knew. After all, if a childless couple in their 50s suddenly has a 6-year-old, it's going to be noticed. The kids on her street made fun of Marie for being adopted, but when Marie would ask her mother if this was true, Akersha told her, of course not. When she was 13, Marie found a vaccination record for Patricia DeMille and was suddenly flooded with memories. She remembered her birth mother, she remembered being called Pat. She brought the record to her mother, and Akersha still denied that Marie was not her biological child. The substandard treatment of Marie continued into her teen years. Marie was told that she had to be home by the time the streetlights came on. One night, when she was 14, she realized that she had lost track of time and the streetlights were already on. She sprinted home, but when she got there, the door was locked. Marie banged on it, begging her parents to let her in. Her father opened the door and said, "Go away, you don't live here anymore." She spent the night outside. Social services caught wind of this and convinced the Bartellos to send Marie to boarding school. St. Teresa's Home for Girls was a religious school, and Marie blossomed there. Not only was she able to devote herself to religion openly, but she also excelled at her studies. Even so, Marie was an isolated young woman with a temper and a deep depression, no doubt brought on by her upbringing. St. Teresa's was a healing environment, but it couldn't erase those years of abuse. And you won't believe this. 2 years later, the Bartellos contacted Marie at St. Teresa's and told their daughter that they missed her and they wanted her to come home. Of course, Marie said no. So the Bartellos stopped paying her tuition, knowing that St. Teresa's wouldn't keep her as a student if they didn't get money. But 16-year-old Marie was determined not to go back to the hell that was her parents' home. Instead, she moved into a rooming house and got a job. But her depression was worsening, and some days she couldn't get out of bed and she missed work. Not wanting to be fired, Marie quit her job, and a few days later she attempted suicide. As an adult, Marie said of her attempt, "I don't know if I really wanted to die or if I was just looking for a different life. I was trying to reach out and I didn't know how to." It was the suicide attempt that led her to Danvers State Hospital. She was 16, and for the next 8 years, Marie was bounced from ward to ward, depending on the severity of her symptoms. She had constant panic attacks that included muscle spasms, choking, hyperventilation, and hallucinations. While these days Marie would qualify as having a panic disorder and major depression with psychotic features, the doctors at Danvers diagnosed her with schizophrenia. Marie said that a person who had a panic disorder was identified as a little bit crazy, and this was the 40s. Schizophrenia was very much a catch-all diagnosis that was applied to people with everything from hyperthyroidism to autism, and Marie was treated for it. As soon as drugs were available, Marie was put on them. Her dose of an experimental antipsychotic was at almost a lethal level, and exacerbated the symptoms of the disorder she actually had. She lost so much weight that she was down to 86 pounds, and still her medication was upped from 40 milligrams a day to 2,500 milligrams a day. She lost more weight, her teeth fell out, she had little control of her body. Once, her medication sent her into a toxic coma. She spent every day in bed, unable to do anything. Finally, medicine developed enough that Marie was given her proper diagnosis and her medications were changed to treat her true illnesses. While by no means cured, Marie felt more like herself and started dreaming of living in the, quote, outside world. She made several attempts to live on her own, leaving Danvers, getting a job, getting an apartment, only to be devastated by some negative event that forced her back to Danvers. One attempt involved Marie's birth mother, Mary, taking her in, but Mary was still a troubled alcoholic, and Marie went back to Danvers after just a few days. And there she stayed for the next 2 decades. If you missed our first episode that outlined the goings-on at Danvers Hospital, while Marie was there, it was still the hospital's most shameful period. Patients disappeared and were never found, it was overcrowded by a lot, and it was filthy. When Marie arrived at Danvers for the first time, she was terrified. Almost all of the female patients were elderly, some were wandering around naked, and too many were tied into chairs as a means of controlling them. Seeing this, Marie thought, "This is the end of my life." Then, in the early 1960s, something changed. Not even Marie knows what it was. Maybe she was on a medication that flicked a switch, or maybe it was just the normal ebb and flow many depressives go through. All she knows is that after spending the last 2 years in an intensive rehabilitative unit, she didn't want to be there anymore. Now, I hate it when podcasters, or anyone really, drops a statement like that, making it seem like all Marie needed to get out of Danvers for good was wake up one morning with a big ol' smile and fresh determination. As someone with a mental illness, I've been told that all I need to get over my depression is to smile or exercise or whatever stupid, simple solutions the person providing them thinks will work. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably aware of how frustrating it is that People think that a mentally ill person just hasn't considered to think positive to be cured of their ills. And that's not what happened to Marie. Most likely, she woke up most mornings thinking how much she didn't want to be hospitalized. Danvers was a sort of safe haven for her, but Marie was bright and no doubt wanted to make something more of her life. But it may have taken those 20-plus years for everything to line up, physically, mentally, for Marie to begin her final stage of recovery. Remember, before her final 2 decades at Danvers, Marie had attempted to live outside of the hospital, but because she wasn't well enough, all of those attempts failed. It's hard to get better when you're unstable and life is unstable. Despite the sordid history of Danvers at this time, Marie had developed wonderful relationships with the nurses, which helped her recovery immensely. And she was finally on the proper medication for her anxiety and depression after years of experimentation. Finally, her illnesses were being managed. Her mind was clear enough to see that there was something beyond the crippling depression that had kept her in bed day after day for years. Living at Danvers while recovering, as opposed to battling everyday life, may have been the key for Marie. In any case, with the support of the nurses and her medication, Marie was finally discharged from Danvers for the last time in 1966. She was 36 and made a promise to herself and to God that she would use her freedom and intellect to help those struggling with mental illness. She enrolled in a community college psychology program with some hesitation. She was worried that pushing herself into a full-time education, along with holding a job and paying bills, might fracture her mind again. And though she had no money to pay tuition herself, Marie was denied a grant from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health because she was considered too much of a risk. But the college registrar saw something in her that made him reach into his own pocket and pay for her tuition. Of course, a college education was much cheaper than it is today, especially at a state school. But even if the registrar only paid $200 every year for 4 years, that's the equivalent of about $6,500 today. Marie was very conscious of her mental health while in college. She developed a good relationship with her Intro to Psychology professor, Sheldon S. Brown, known as Shelley. She told him that she might have to leave the classroom abruptly if she suffered a panic attack, and Brown told her that was just fine. She did well in his class, and when she signed up for his child psychology course the next semester, she received a grant after Brown recommended her as his TA. While bravely taking on her education as well as a job, Marie had also embarked on another part of real-world adult life, a romantic relationship. It's hard to find details on Marie's relationship with Joseph Balter, but what we do know is that he was just a year older than her and had also been a patient at Danvers. I'm not sure if they knew each other while at the hospital, but considering how long Marie was there, it's very possible. Whether they had been acquainted before, though, it was no doubt a relief to find and fall in love with someone who understood her past and the struggles she was still going through. Joseph himself relapsed a few times while they were together. The two were married over Marie's first winter break from college, and she left the college a few months later to concentrate on her married life. She did eventually return to her studies, but even while she was away, Professor Brown made sure to keep her grant active. He would come by and drop off his work at Marie and Joe's apartment for her to look over, and soon enough, Marie returned to school. She graduated from college in 1973 and transferred to Salem State College, which is now Salem State University, to finish her bachelor's. During her senior year at Salem State, Marie's world was turned upside down. While she was taking her final exams, her husband suffered a blood clot and died on New Year's Day of 1967. Then, Marie herself was diagnosed with bladder cancer. It seems like the people with the most troubles in life are constantly bombarded with this stuff, and it sucks. Somehow, though, Marie persevered and graduated with her degree, chosen as student speaker for the ceremony, where she described her journey. Professor Brown attended and joined the rest of the audience in a standing ovation following her speech. The more I read about Marie, the more amazed I became. She truly made up for lost time after she left Danvers. Getting her bachelor's degree, getting married, writing her first book, and applying to master's programs. But it can't be denied that her illnesses still followed her. There's little mention of how she dealt with her depression and panic disorder post-Danvers, but the fact that she had been hospitalized for them must have been public record, because after Marie started her master's program at the University of Texas, she was expelled because she had been institutionalized. A little ironic since her first program had celebrated her overcoming this. But Marie had also been accepted at a handful of other programs, and out of those, she chose Harvard University. While there, Marie held religious services in her home and thought maybe she'd become a pastoral counselor, but she majored in education. Just as she did at her other universities, Marie developed close relationships with her professors and would write her most famous book, Nobody's Child, with one of them. About her time here, Marie said, quote, "Harvard gave me the ability to look at the world as a whole, and it gave me the courage to try." After Harvard, Marie began her career as a social worker, working on keeping that vow she made to God and herself to dedicate herself to the mentally ill. She managed 2 group homes while doing interviews on national TV and putting finishing touches on her first book. Before the book Nobody's Child was even released, Hollywood producer Lee Grant saw an interview with Marie on TV when she was awarded the Wonder Woman Award. Grant approached Marie about turning her life story into a movie, and in 1986, the TV movie Nobody's Child came out, starring Marlo Thomas as Marie. If you're interested, you can check that out on YouTube or Amazon. Marie's first book, Sing No Sad Songs, was published in 1987. It was an autobiography that her Harvard professor Richard Katz later helped her turn into the more expanded Nobody's Child in 1991 and boost sales. But when the initial book came out, Marie was using the sales to fund her latest project, the Balter Institute, named for her husband. Located in Ipswich, Marie used her own money to rent the space and hire the doctors, and the institute was dedicated to patient-led healthcare. Unfortunately, Marie ran out of money not too long after because mental health was undervalued and underfunded. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Some more irony. Following her graduation from Harvard, Marie was enthusiastically approached by the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. Yeah, the same one that refused to help her pay for her undergraduate education. As far as I know, though, she never worked directly for them. Where she did choose to work was Danvers State Hospital, her home for most of her life. It was 1988, and Danvers was still in bad condition. It housed some 2,500 patients, which was twice its recommended capacity. As the director of community affairs, Marie was a spokeswoman for the hospital, trained employees, screened volunteers, applied for grants, and ran fundraisers. She was 58 years old and just getting started. This woman truly amazes me, especially when I learned that she eventually forgave her parents, both adopted and biological, and even reunited with the Bartellos. As we know, Danvers State Hospital did close in 1992 despite Marie's tireless work. But Marie being Marie, that was not the end for her. She received the American Heroine Award for Outstanding Achievement in the field of mental health. In 1990, she had won America's Award of Hope, presented to her by then-President Bush. And in 1995, she got the Christopher's Award for her writing and the film adaptation of Nobody's Child, an honor given to fewer than 100 people worldwide after being established in 1949. A documentary sequel to Nobody's Child was made called Beyond Mental Illness, The Journey of Marie Balter. It's on YouTube and was one of the main sources of research for this episode. She was also awarded an honorary doctorate from her first alma mater, Salem State College, and she wrote a third book, A Burning Ember. It's possible that Marie married again, as her obituary lists a stepson and a stepdaughter, but I couldn't find evidence to support this. I guess the kids could have been Joe's children from a first marriage, but again, no information is available. I kind of hope that it's the latter, though, so Marie still had some family around after Joe died. Marie Rose Balter died on August 9th, 1999, at 68, and was buried in the North Beverly Cemetery. A beautiful black marble bench was erected in her honor at the Danvers State Hospital Cemetery. The memorial is etched with her image and the following: "In loving memory of Marie Rose Balter, nobody's child, a resident of DSH from 1948 to 1968, a woman of strong faith who overcame many adversities during her life and helped others do the same." Even with the demolition of Danvers State Hospital and the building of the apartments in its place, the Danvers State Hospital is still there, and so is Marie's memorial bench. Marie's story is both harrowing and inspiring, and it's been touted as a message for hope for people who are currently battling a mental illness, and especially for those doing so in a psych hospital. Marie's story tells those people that if you think you're broken or worthless or trapped, and even if you're treated like you're all of those things, your life is still worth living. And it's not too late to start living it either. After all, Marie didn't enroll in undergrad until she was 36. She's also a reminder to stay in tune with your health and be able to say when you're overwhelmed without feeling shame for it. She was a true champion for mental health. Thanks for listening to the second episode of We're All Mad Here. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would be awesome if you left a 5-star review on iTunes, subscribe, all that stuff. I do have a Patreon account, and it'll be linked in the show notes, but Patreon is kind of pointless until I get more listeners, and iTunes reviews are a huge part of that. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you all next time.
Hey guys, it's Lainey, host of the True Crime Fan Club podcast. If you're a true crime addict like I am, then my podcast is for you. It's a podcast for the ultimate true crime enthusiast, giving you a glimpse into the life and crimes of the most demented minds. You won't want to miss an episode.